Imagine someone slowly chipping away at your confidence, one sarcastic comment, one ignored message, one public insult at a time. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize it's happening until their self-respect is already gone. Today, we're uncovering 5 types of disrespect you should never tolerate because the moment you recognize them is the moment you take your power back. If you're finding value in this message, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more insights on confidence, boundaries, and personal growth. And in the comments, tell me, which type of disrespect have you experienced the most? Public humiliation is one of the most damaging forms of disrespect because it attacks a person's dignity in front of others. It happens when someone mocks you, exposes your mistakes, or makes sarcastic comments about you while others are watching. Sometimes it is disguised as humor, teasing, or just being honest. But the real intention behind it is often to lower your status while raising theirs. Human beings naturally care about how they are perceived socially, so when someone embarrasses you publicly, it can trigger feelings of shame, anger, and powerlessness all at once. The person doing it might laugh it off or expect everyone else to laugh too, which creates pressure on you to stay silent in order to avoid making the situation even more uncomfortable. What makes public humiliation particularly harmful is that it changes the dynamic of how people see you. When someone repeatedly jokes about your abilities, your intelligence, or your mistakes in front of others, it slowly builds a narrative that you are less capable or less respectable. Even if the comments are exaggerated or unfair, repetition makes them stick in people's minds. Over time, this can affect your confidence and how seriously others take you in conversations or decisions. Many people tolerate this behavior because they don't want to appear overly sensitive or confrontational, but silence often sends the signal that the behavior is acceptable. Another reason this type of disrespect spreads is because audiences often reward it with laughter or attention. When the person humiliating you gets a reaction from the group, it reinforces their behavior and encourages them to repeat it. This turns the situation into a pattern where your discomfort becomes entertainment for others. In environments like workplaces, schools, or social circles, this pattern can quietly establish unhealthy power dynamics where one person dominates by diminishing someone else. Recognizing this behavior is important because respect should never require someone to sacrifice their dignity. Healthy humor includes everyone, rather than targeting one individual repeatedly. When a person consistently makes you the subject of ridicule, it reveals a deeper lack of respect for your boundaries and self-worth. Addressing it calmly, setting limits, or refusing to participate in the joke disrupts the pattern and signals that your dignity is not something others are free to use for amusement. Consistently dismissing your opinions is a subtle but powerful form of disrespect because it slowly erodes your sense of value and confidence. It happens when someone regularly ignores your ideas, talks over you while you are speaking, interrupts before you finish your thoughts, or immediately shuts down your perspective without even considering it. In healthy conversations, disagreement is normal and even productive, but dismissal is different. It communicates that your voice does not matter enough to be heard. Over time, this behavior creates an invisible hierarchy where one person's thoughts are treated as important, while the other person's contributions are treated as insignificant. This type of disrespect often appears in everyday interactions. In meetings, someone might interrupt you repeatedly or claim credit for an idea you already mentioned. In personal relationships, a person might brush off your concerns by saying you are overreacting or that your opinion is not practical. In group discussions, people may move on without acknowledging what you said at all. Each individual moment might seem small, but the pattern sends a clear message that your perspective holds little weight. When this happens repeatedly, it can make you hesitate to speak up in the future because you begin to expect that your words will be ignored anyway. The psychological impact of constant dismissal can be significant. Humans naturally seek validation and acknowledgement in communication, and when that acknowledgement is missing, it creates doubt. You might start questioning whether your thoughts are actually valuable or whether you are expressing yourself clearly enough. This self-doubt can make people quieter over time, which unintentionally reinforces the dynamic because the dismissive person becomes even more dominant in conversations. Another reason this behavior is harmful is that it removes balance from relationships and environments that should involve mutual respect. Conversations are meant to exchange ideas, not silence one side completely. When someone regularly ignores your input, they are essentially deciding that their viewpoint deserves all the attention and authority. This creates a power imbalance where the flow of communication becomes one-sided rather than collaborative. Respectful communication requires listening, even when opinions differ. It involves allowing others the space to express themselves fully before responding. When someone consistently refuses to provide that space, they are demonstrating not just disagreement, but a lack of regard for your presence and contribution in the conversation. Violating your boundaries is one of the clearest forms of disrespect because boundaries represent the limits that protect your time, energy, values, and emotional well-being. Every person has boundaries, whether they openly communicate them or not. These limits might involve how much time you're willing to give, what behavior you will tolerate, or how people are allowed to speak to you. When someone knowingly pushes past those limits, pressures you to change them, or repeatedly ignores them, it shows that they value their own desires more than your comfort or autonomy. This type of disrespect often begins in subtle ways. Someone might ask for a favor after you have already said you are busy, expecting that you will eventually give in. A friend may pressure you to attend events you clearly said you do not want to attend. A coworker might continue assigning you extra tasks, even after you have explained that your workload is already full. In these situations, the problem is not the request itself, but the refusal to respect your answer. When no is treated as a challenge instead of a clear response, it turns a simple interaction into a violation of personal limits. One of the reasons people struggle with boundary violations is the fear of appearing rude or uncooperative. Many individuals are taught to prioritize harmony over personal comfort, which makes it easier for others to push past their limits. Some people also rely on guilt or emotional pressure to break boundaries, using phrases that imply you are selfish or uncaring if you refuse. Over time, this pressure can make someone feel obligated to comply even when they feel uncomfortable or exhausted. Repeated boundary violations create an unhealthy dynamic where one person continuously takes while the other keeps sacrificing their needs. It slowly drains emotional energy and creates resentment because the relationship becomes unbalanced. The person ignoring the boundary may grow used to getting their way, assuming that persistence will always lead to compliance. Respectful relationships function very differently because they acknowledge that boundaries are necessary for trust and emotional safety. When someone truly respects you, they recognize that your limits are not obstacles to overcome, but signals that define how you wish to be treated. Ignoring those limits repeatedly reveals a deeper disregard for your independence and personal space. Emotional manipulation is one of the most subtle and confusing forms of disrespect because it does not always look aggressive or obvious. Instead of direct insults or clear violations, it operates through guilt, confusion, and psychological pressure. The person manipulating you often twists situations in ways that make you question your own feelings, memories, or decisions. Instead of openly taking responsibility for their behavior, they shift the focus onto you, making it seem as though you are the cause of the problem. Over time, this creates a cycle where you constantly feel the need to explain yourself, defend your intentions, or apologize for things that were never truly your fault. One common form of emotional manipulation is guilt tripping. A person might make statements that imply you are selfish or uncaring if you do not meet their expectations. For example, if you decline a request or set a boundary, they might respond by reminding you of everything they have done for you or by suggesting that you are letting them down. This tactic creates emotional pressure because it makes you feel responsible for their disappointment. Instead of respecting your decision, The manipulator reframes the situation so that your reasonable boundary appears like a personal attack against them. Another common tactic is gaslighting, where the manipulator denies events, twists facts, or claims that you misunderstood something that clearly happened. If you bring up a hurtful comment or unfair behavior, they might insist that you are imagining things or exaggerating the situation. Over time, this repeated denial can make you doubt your own perception of reality. When a person starts questioning their own judgment, it becomes much easier for the manipulator to control the narrative and avoid accountability. Emotional manipulators also often play the role of the victim. Instead of addressing the issue directly, they shift the conversation toward their own struggles or hardships. This redirects sympathy toward them and away from the real problem. The focus moves from their actions to your reaction, making you feel guilty for expressing your feelings in the first place. What makes emotional manipulation particularly damaging is how gradually it affects a person's confidence and emotional stability. It creates an environment where you are constantly second-guessing your thoughts and trying to keep the peace. The manipulator gains control not through force, but by shaping your emotions and reactions in a way that benefits them. Chronic lack of appreciation is a quiet but deeply harmful form of disrespect because it slowly makes a person feel invisible and undervalued. Appreciation is one of the simplest ways people acknowledge each other's effort, time, and presence. When someone consistently receives help, support, or kindness, but rarely recognizes it, the message being sent is that those efforts are expected rather than valued. Over time, this creates an emotional imbalance where one person keeps giving while the other keeps benefiting without expressing gratitude or acknowledgement. This type of disrespect often develops gradually in relationships. In friendships, one person may always be the one who listens, helps solve problems, or makes time for the other, yet their support is treated like a normal obligation instead of something meaningful. In workplaces, an employee may consistently put in extra effort, stay late, or contribute ideas that help the team succeed, but their work goes unnoticed while others receive credit. In families or romantic relationships, a person might constantly invest energy into maintaining harmony, helping others, or making sacrifices, yet their contributions are rarely recognized. The problem is not simply the absence of a thank you. It is the repeated pattern of someone benefiting from your effort while behaving as if that effort is automatic or guaranteed. When appreciation disappears, people can begin to feel like their role in the relationship is purely functional rather than valued. Instead of feeling respected, they begin to feel like a resource that others rely on without acknowledging the cost behind the support they provide. Another reason chronic lack of appreciation is harmful is that it gradually drains motivation and emotional energy. When people feel recognized, they naturally feel encouraged to continue contributing because they know their actions matter. Without that recognition, the same actions begin to feel exhausting and one-sided. The person giving may start questioning whether their presence truly matters or if they are simply being taken for granted. Over time, this pattern can reshape the entire dynamic of a relationship. The person who receives constant help may grow accustomed to it and stop noticing the effort involved, while the person giving begins to feel increasingly overlooked. This imbalance turns what should be mutual respect into quiet resentment and emotional fatigue. Repeated patterns of disrespect reveal far more about a person's character than a single negative moment. Everyone can make a mistake, speak harshly in frustration, or behave poorly under stress. What truly defines a person, however, is whether that behavior becomes a pattern. When disrespect happens again and again, despite clear signals that it is hurtful or unacceptable, it shows that the person either does not value your feelings or does not feel motivated to change their behavior. Patterns remove the possibility of misunderstanding and expose the real nature of how someone chooses to treat others. At first, repeated disrespect can be easy to excuse. People often justify it by telling themselves that the other person is simply having a bad day or that the situation is temporary. A sarcastic comment might be brushed off as humor, a broken promise might be forgiven as forgetfulness, and an insensitive remark might be explained away as poor communication. These explanations feel reasonable in the moment because they allow the relationship to continue without confrontation. However, when the same actions continue happening over time, it becomes harder to ignore that the behavior is intentional or at least comfortably repeated without concern. Patterns of disrespect also tend to escalate when they are tolerated. When someone notices that their negative behavior does not lead to serious consequences, they may feel no reason to change it. What begins as small acts, such as dismissive comments or minor boundary violations, can grow into more obvious forms of disrespect. The lack of resistance signals that the behavior is acceptable, which encourages the person to continue pushing limits further. Another problem with repeated disrespect is the psychological effect it has on the person experiencing it. Constant exposure to negative treatment can gradually lower self-confidence and create doubt about what should or should not be tolerated. A person may start questioning whether they are expecting too much respect or whether they are being overly sensitive. This internal conflict can keep someone stuck in a situation that continues to harm their sense of worth. Recognizing patterns is important because behavior that repeats over time reflects consistent choices rather than accidental mistakes. When someone repeatedly shows disregard for your feelings, boundaries, or dignity, they are revealing their priorities through their actions. Walking away is sometimes the strongest response to disrespect because it shifts the focus from trying to change someone else's behavior to protecting your own dignity and peace of mind. Many people believe strength means confronting every problem directly, arguing their point, or forcing others to recognize their mistake. While confrontation can sometimes be necessary, there are situations where continuing to engage only feeds the cycle of negativity. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, argues in bad faith, or refuses to acknowledge your boundaries, walking away becomes a powerful statement that you will no longer participate in the dynamic. One of the reasons this response is so powerful is because it removes the attention and reaction that many disrespectful people rely on. Some individuals thrive on conflict, knowing that provoking you will lead to arguments, emotional reactions, or prolonged discussions where they can continue asserting control. When you calmly disengage instead of responding with anger or desperation, the dynamic changes. Your silence and distance communicate something more meaningful than words because they show that your time and emotional energy are not available for behavior that undermines your respect. Walking away also requires a level of self-awareness and confidence that many people struggle to develop. It involves recognizing that not every situation needs to be won or resolved immediately. Sometimes the healthiest choice is accepting that another person is unwilling to treat you with the respect you deserve. Instead of trying endlessly to convince them to change, you redirect your focus toward environments and relationships where mutual respect exists naturally. Another important aspect of walking away is the protection it provides for your mental and emotional health. Constant exposure to disrespect can create stress, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. Remaining in those situations often leads to repeated arguments, misunderstandings, and feelings of resentment. By choosing distance, you create space for clarity and emotional stability, allowing yourself to step out of a cycle that would otherwise continue draining your energy. Walking away does not always mean ending a relationship permanently. Sometimes it simply means removing yourself from a specific conversation or refusing to engage in behavior that crosses your boundaries. The act itself communicates a clear message through action rather than words, demonstrating that respect is a requirement for your continued presence. Self-respect is the foundation that determines how others treat you because people naturally observe the standards you set for yourself. The way you respond to situations, the boundaries you enforce, and the behavior you tolerate quietly teach others what is acceptable when interacting with you. When a person carries a strong sense of self-respect, they communicate through their actions that their time, dignity, and emotional well-being matter. This creates an invisible line that discourages others from crossing into disrespectful behavior. Self-respect begins internally before it is ever expressed outwardly. It involves recognizing your own value and believing that you deserve to be treated with fairness and consideration. When someone truly believes this, they are less likely to accept treatment that undermines their dignity. This mindset influences the tone of their conversations, the choices they make about who they spend time with, and the way they respond when someone behaves poorly toward them. People who respect themselves naturally speak with confidence and clarity, which signals to others that they expect mutual respect in return. When self respect is weak or uncertain, it often becomes easier for others to test boundaries. If someone repeatedly tolerates disrespectful jokes, dismissive comments, or manipulative behavior without addressing it, others may assume that such treatment is acceptable. This does not mean the person deserves disrespect, but it shows how social dynamics can form around the behavior that is allowed to continue. Over time, tolerating small acts of disrespect can gradually shape the way people interact with you. Self-respect also influences the choices a person makes about relationships and environments. When someone values themselves, they become more selective about the people they allow into their lives. They recognize that respect should be mutual and consistent rather than something they must constantly fight to receive. This awareness helps them distance themselves from situations where their dignity is repeatedly challenged or ignored. Another important aspect of self-respect is the ability to remain calm and composed when faced with disrespect. Instead of reacting with insecurity or desperation for approval, a self-respecting person responds with clarity and firmness. Their behavior reflects the belief that respect is not something they need to beg for, but something they naturally uphold through their standards and actions,